The small town of Black Hollow was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Nestled deep within a dense forest, it was a town that seemed perpetually shrouded in a misty gloom, even on the sunniest of days. The streets were lined with old, creaky houses, their paint peeling and windows dark. It was the kind of town where children dared each other to walk past the abandoned mill at the edge of the woods, where whispers of old tragedies lingered in the air like ghosts. Megan Carter had lived in Black Hollow her entire life. At 23, she was a bright, ambitious young woman with dreams of leaving the town behind and starting a new life in the city. She worked at the local library during the day and spent her evenings sketching in her notebook, her mind filled with designs for the fashion line she hoped to one day create. But Megan's life was about to take a dark and terrifying turn, one that would plunge her into a nightmare she could never have imagined. It started with the letters. At first, they seemed harmless enough. Anonymous notes left in her mailbox, filled with cryptic compliments and vague declarations of admiration. "Your smile lights up the darkest corners of this town," one read. "I watch you from afar, and you are more beautiful every day," said another. Megan brushed them off, assuming they were from some shy admirer who would eventually work up the courage to introduce themselves. But as the weeks went by, the letters grew more frequent and more unsettling. "I know you like to sit by the window when you sketch. The moonlight makes you look like an angel. You always wear that blue scarf on Tuesdays. It's my favorite." Megan's initial amusement turned to unease. Someone was watching her, someone who knew her routines, her habits, her life. She began to feel a constant prickling sensation on the back of her neck, as though unseen eyes were following her every move. One evening, as Megan walked home from the library, she noticed a figure standing beneath the flickering street lamp at the end of her block. The person was too far away to make out any details, but something about the way they stood, completely still, unnaturally so, sent a shiver down her spine. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. When she glanced back, the figure was gone. That night, she double-checked the locks on her doors and windows, something she had never felt the need to do before. As she lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The house creaked and groaned, the wind howling outside her window. She told herself it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew better. The next morning, Megan found another letter waiting for her. This one was different. The handwriting was jagged, almost frantic, and the words sent a chill through her veins. "You looked so beautiful last night, running from me. But you can't run forever, Megan. I'm coming for you." Her hands trembled as she read the note over and over, her mind racing. Who was doing this? Why were they targeting her? She thought about going to the police, but what could she tell them? That she was receiving creepy letters? They would probably laugh it off, tell her to be more careful. But Megan knew this wasn't just some harmless prank. This was something far more sinister. Over the next few days, the letters continued to arrive, each one more disturbing than the last. "I can hear you crying at night. It's such a beautiful sound. I was in your house last night. You looked so peaceful, sleeping in your bed." Megan's fear grew with each passing day. She started sleeping with a knife under her pillow, jumping at every sound. She stopped going out after dark, avoiding the streets she used to walk without a second thought. But no matter how careful she was, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her once peaceful life had become a living nightmare, and she had no idea how to escape it. Then, one night, the unthinkable happened. Megan was in her kitchen making a cup of tea when she heard a noise coming from the living room. It was a soft, almost imperceptible sound like the creak of a floorboard. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The house was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. She told herself it was nothing, just the old house settling, but deep down she knew better. Slowly, she reached for the knife she kept on the counter, her fingers trembling as she wrapped them around the handle. She crept toward the living room, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure whoever was there could hear it. The room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. She scanned the shadows, her eyes darting from corner to corner, and then she saw it, a figure standing in the far corner of the room, completely still, watching her. Megan's scream tore through the silence, but before she could react, the figure lunged at her. She swung the knife wildly, but it was knocked from her hand with ease. Strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her into a suffocating embrace. She struggled with all her might, kicking and clawing, but it was no use. The figure was too strong. She felt a sharp pain in her side, and then everything went black. When Megan woke up, she was in a place she didn't recognize. The air was damp and cold, the walls made of rough, unfinished stone. She was lying on a thin, dirty mattress, her hands and feet bound with thick rope. Panic surged through her as she realized where she was. A basement, or maybe a cellar. The only light came from a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. She tried to scream, but a rag had been stuffed into her mouth, muffling her cries. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together what had happened. Who had taken her? What did they want? And then she heard it, the sound of footsteps descending the stairs. Her heart pounded as the door creaked open, and the figure from her living room stepped into the room. It was a man, tall and thin, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. His hair was greasy, hanging in limp strands around his face. He was wearing a tattered coat, the sleeves stained with what looked like dried blood. Megan's breath came in short, panicked gasps as he approached her, a twisted smile on his face. "Hello, Megan," he said, his voice low and raspy. "I've been waiting for this moment for so long." He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek, and she recoiled in horror. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. "We're going to have so much fun together." The days, or maybe it was weeks, Megan couldn't tell, blurred together in a haze of terror and pain. Her captor, who called himself the Collector, visited her regularly, sometimes bringing food and water, other times just to taunt her. He told her about the other girls he had taken, the ones who hadn't been as special as she was. He spoke of their screams, their tears, their final moments, as though they were nothing more than stories to entertain her. Megan's mind began to fracture under the weight of her fear and despair. She cried herself to sleep every night, her body aching from the cold and the rough treatment. She thought about giving up, about letting the darkness take her, but something inside her refused to let go. She had to survive. She had to escape. One night, as the Collector was leaving, Megan noticed something she hadn't before, a loose stone in the wall near the door. Her heart leapt with hope as she realized it might be her only chance. She waited until she was sure he was gone, then began to work at the stone with her bound hands. It was slow, painful work, but she didn't care. She had to get out. Finally, after what felt like hours, the stone came loose. She reached into the hole, her fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. It was a key. Tears streamed down her face as she fumbled with the lock on her restraints, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the key. But finally, the lock clicked open, and she was free. Megan didn't stop to think. She ran for the stairs, her legs weak and unsteady, but fueled by sheer adrenaline. The door at the top was locked, but she threw herself against it again and again until it finally gave way. She stumbled into the night, the cold air hitting her like a slap. She didn't know where she was, but she didn't care. She just had to get away. She ran through the woods, branches tearing at her skin, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear him behind her, his footsteps pounding against the ground, his voice calling out to her, "Megan, come back! You can't escape me!" But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Finally, she burst out of the woods and onto a deserted road. She could see lights in the distance, a house maybe, or a gas station. She ran toward them, her legs screaming in protest, her vision blurring with tears. She didn't dare look back. She didn't want to see how close he was. She reached the house and pounded on the door, screaming for help. The door opened, and a man stood there, his face a mixture of shock and concern. "Please," Megan gasped, collapsing into his arms. "Help me, he's coming." The police arrived soon after, but by the time they searched the woods, the collector was gone. All they found was the cellar, empty except for the dirty mattress and the flickering light. Megan was taken to the hospital, where she was treated for her injuries and questioned by the police. She told them everything she could remember, but it wasn't much. She didn't know his real name, or where he had taken her, or where he might be now. The police assured her they would do everything they could to find him, but Megan knew the truth. He was still out there, watching, waiting, and he wasn't done with her. Megan tried to go back to her normal life, but it was impossible. She jumped at every sound, every shadow. She couldn't sleep without the lights on, and even then, she would wake up screaming, convinced he was in the room with her. She quit her job at the library and rarely left the house. Her dreams of leaving Black Hollow were gone, replaced by a paralyzing fear that kept her trapped in the town she had once longed to escape. And then one day, she found another letter in her mailbox. The handwriting was the same, the words sending a chill through her veins. "You thought you could get away from me, Megan, but you were wrong. I'm still here, and I'm coming for you." Megan's story is a chilling reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the monsters we fear are all too real. The collector was never caught, and to this day, Megan lives in fear, knowing that he could be watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And so, the town of Black Hollow remains shrouded in its perpetual gloom, a place where the shadows hold secrets too terrifying to imagine. If you enjoyed this spine-chilling tale of terror, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. And remember, the scariest truth of all is that monsters don't just live in the shadows, they walk among us, hidden in plain sight. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe, and always trust your instincts. The darkness is closer than you think.